If you're outside of Japan, the name Goemon is one you probably associate almost exclusively with the Nintendo 64. Mystical Ninja starring Goemon, released by Konami in 1997, is one of the quintessential hidden gems of the platform. A cult classic that is so sought after nowadays that calling it hidden may be a bit of a stretch. If this game piqued your curiosity, you could potentially be aware of its less discussed sequel, Goemon's Great Adventure, or its Super Nintendo predecessor, The Legend of the Mystical Ninja. But the place this blue-haired ninja holds in gaming history is, in reality, a much larger deal than our unworthy Western minds have been afforded the opportunity to experience. Celebrating his 35th anniversary at the time of this recording, a milestone that definitely won't be overshadowed by any other gaming anniversaries, and with over 30 games under his little yellow belt, Goemon is nothing short of a gaming icon synonymous with high-quality third-party software to be enjoyed on classic Nintendo hardware. In this regard, if not for a lack of worldwide localizations, he would easily be in good company among the likes of a character like Mega Man, or even his own Konami sibling, Simon Belmont. And as such, I think he's easily one of the best additions that could grace the Super Smash Bros. Roster in the future, and not just as a Mii Costume. But enough vagaries and generalizations, let's start at the beginning. And by the beginning, I of course mean the mid-1500s, during the Sengoku period of Japan, where the legendary outlaw Ishikawa Goemon would cement his place as a hero of Japanese folklore by stealing gold and treasures from the rich and giving them to the poor. Think Robin Hood. In the end, he and his son would meet their untimely end by being publicly boiled alive after failing to assassinate the warlord Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Ouch. Fast forward just a tiny bit to 1986, and Mr. Goemon, that's our Goemon, hit Japanese arcades courtesy of Konami. Konami's Goemon, who is merely inspired by the historical figure, doesn't yet don his iconic blue hairstyle, and the gameplay here isn't quite in line with the rest of the series, but this original arcade game is fun, and worth mentioning nonetheless. But only a few months later, the true genesis of the Goemon series proper would land on the Nintendo Famicom. Ganbare Goemon Karakuri Dochu would establish many tropes of the series. You play as Goemon from a sort of top-down perspective. Armed with his trademark Kiseru smoking pipe as a weapon, you explore old-timey Japanese villages with the goal of toppling greedy feudal lords and redistributing some hard-earned coin to the people. In each stage, which consists of multiple sub-areas, you must find 3 passes to move on to the next level. You defeat enemies and jump over pots to earn money, which you can then spend at shops to upgrade your defenses and movement abilities, which in turn allows you to access hidden areas of the level where the gate passes are hidden. Even in this early entry, the series' personality and knack for innovation would shine through, both in the awesome zany dialogue with random villagers and many other details. You even have the option to enter these first-person mazes to find extra treasures, which is super impressive for the time. Even the series' new moniker here, Ganbare Goemon, which basically means "Go for it, Goemon," is much more charming than the plain old Mr. Goemon that preceded it. The "Go for it, Goemon" title, followed by some sort of subtitle, in this case Karakuri Dochu, or roughly The Tricky Path, would become the standard naming convention for most entries in the series from here on out. Given that most of the games are Japanese only, this can get really confusing, so I apologize in advance. I do like this way of naming the games though, because it fits perfectly with the personality of the series. Like each game is a different episode of a Saturday morning cartoon or something. But anyway, to keep a long story less long, the game is simply fantastic. It would rightfully go on to become synonymous with the Famicom in Japan. It even saw a re-release on the Game Boy Advance later down the line as a part of the Famicom mini-series. But Goemon would also star in 3 more Famicom games. Ganbare Goemon 2, which introduced co-op gameplay, and Goemon's eternal sidekick, the lovable and somewhat dopey Ibisumaru, and 2 full-fledged Goemon RPGs, Ganbare Goemon Gaiden 1 and 2. These games are pretty quirky turn-based RPGs with a vast amount of in-game text, so much so that they had to be released on these giant carts. I've read online that this second game actually has the most in-game text out of any Famicom game. Neat. There are also 2 unique entries on the original Game Boy, as well as 3 more later down the line on the Game Boy Color, but the series would really hit its stride when it landed on the Super Famicom, with its very first worldwide release, The Legend of the Mystical Ninja, or, as it should be properly called, Go For It Goemon, The Rescue of Princess Yuki. It's an upgraded take on everything that made the Famicom original great. Think of this as the Mega Man X of the series, a 16-bit reboot that really kicks things into high gear with more sub-games, the introduction of more vital characters and abilities, boss battles, upgraded visuals and music, more elaborate side-scrolling platforming sections. It's a verified classic. The North American audience would really get the short end of the stick here, with Goemon and Ibisumaru being shamefully renamed as Kid Ying and Dr. Yang. Ugh. Minor alterations were made in other places too, like the rice balls being replaced with slices of pizza, but the game was still great at its core. Where we really got shafted here was Konami's decision not to localize the 3 Super Famicom sequels that this game would receive, all of which are really impressive, and honestly even better than the first. These games are like a fusion of tons of other classic gaming franchises all melded into one. You talk to townspeople and collect items like Link, upgrade your weapons on the fly like Simon Belmont. There's a zany cast of playable characters that expands with each game like Sonic. It's amazing. If you're into Nintendo games, platformers, whatever, you're doing yourself a disservice by not playing these games. Or rather, Konami did us a disservice by not localizing these worldwide. By the second game here, Goemon's main crew of friends would be rounded out, alongside Robot Ninja Sasuke and Female Ninja Yai, who were series regulars by this point. The game introduces a giant robot called Impact. You even control him from inside of his head during these punch-out style boss battles with other giant mechs. And this is like within the first 10 minutes of the game or so. It's really cool. You'll be partaking in tons of cool side activities here, like gambling and playing levels of other Konami games in the local arcade. The attention to detail and the amount of love poured into the presentation of these games was at a full-on boiling point by this time. It's worth noting that this second Super Famicom game here is also regarded as like a timeless classic in Japan. Even in modern times, Konami has cashed in on its legacy by producing pachinko machines based on it. The third game sees Goemon and friends traveling through time and allows you to freely swap between all 4 of the main characters at the press of a button, all with their own unique abilities. Yai, for example, has a bazooka and can turn into a mermaid. Yeah, at this point the series was completely comfortable in its own skin, and it had long since abandoned any adherence to the rules of its feudal Japanese setting in favor of complete over-the-top wackiness. And it was all the better for it. These games are so immensely charming that you just have to experience them to get what I mean. The fourth Super Famicom game has 4 entirely separate world maps, one for each character that you're free to tackle in the order of your choosing. Take that, Sonic Adventure 2. It sees the team venturing into outer space, fighting aliens, and going to Impact's home planet. Yeah, apparently he's a giant alien, not a giant robot. Who knew? But there's so much to say about each of these games individually that I literally cannot do it in this video. Maybe I'll do individual reviews of each one of them at some point down the line, but what's important to note is that these games were benchmarks for high quality gameplay and presentation. They're classic platformers. You could easily place this Ganbare Goemon series right up there with Mega Man, Mario, Castlevania. Whatever you can think of, it's right there. And the series rightfully became a phenomenon. There were manga, anime, merchandise, a spin-off game starring Ibisumaru on the Super Famicom, which is really awesome by the way, a Mario Party style spin-off on the N64, an actual board game, Konami Crazy Racers, he's everywhere. The first 2 Super Famicom titles would later be remastered for the Game Boy Advance, and the series would continue onto the N64, with the game we know as Mystical Ninja, and a smattering of other titles would also hit the PS1, GBA, PS2. Goemon even went through an awkward teenage phase with some ill-advised redesigns before eventually the final game in the classic Ganbare Goemon style would land on the Nintendo DS in 2005, and of course, it's Japan only. Ugh. From 1986 to 2005, Goemon reigned supreme on Nintendo hardware, with multiple classic entries on each console. Do I really need to explain why he deserves a spot in Super Smash Bros. At this point? Since the DS game, him and Ibisumaru appeared as characters in Super Bomberman R, and Goemon got the aforementioned Mii Costume as DLC in Smash Ultimate, but he deserves so much more. I could talk for hours about these games, but for now, just trust me. The English translations have just recently started pouring out for these things, thanks to the hard work of the community. Go play them one way or another, you will not regret it, okay? Okay. Whew. That was a lot. But before we move on to Goemon's moveset, let's take a Ganbare Goemon commercial break.
売中。
タイトル「5へ5へ頑張れ五右衛門」ベリー豪華な3本立て。
5へ5へ。
ドバッときたもんだ。
スーパーファミコン頑張れ五右衛門雪姫救出絵巻7月19日。
Okay, so onto the moveset. So Goemon's moves are mostly going to revolve around money. And just like in the games, it'll fuel his neutral special, his iconic Ryo toss. And you gain more money, just like in the games, by attacking enemies with standard attacks. Now you can also gain it with his side special, jumping over a pot, which both acts as a movement option and to regain money. The up B is the fly judo, and the down B opens up your shop menu, where you can really make use of the money you earn. Rice balls will heal your damage slightly. Candles have multiple uses. Firstly, it'll reveal any enemies that have invisibility applied to them. But more importantly, it'll create 2 stairwells at random points on the stage. And these will act as sort of portals between one another while the candle is active. But it only stays around for a short amount of time. The sandals will increase both your movement speed and agility. As a bonus, they will also boost the range and money earning capabilities of your side special. And lastly, Goemon's signature ability, he can attack while he's crawling, which is, as far as I know, unique to him as far as Smash goes. Let's check out some taunts and special animations.
Yo! Yo! This game's winner is Goemon!
Okay, so the stage that I would go with would be the final area of the second Super Famicom game, the Sky Castle. This is where you fight the final boss in that game. And the bottom platforms on either side would be for cameo characters to show up. Abisamaru would fly around in the background, and player characters could stand on the other platforms on either side. Other people would show up here as well. Enemy characters like Kabuki, Omitsu down in the bottom right. You know, all sorts of crazy characters. I just love the aesthetic of this place. Oh, and of course, Impact shows up at some point to wreak havoc. I think it represents the aesthetic of the series well. Here's just a few of the great tracks I would choose to represent the series. over 30 games, most of them being associated with Nintendo hardware, some of which are verified classics, one of them being an 8-bit classic that easily stands up to something like The Legend of Zelda, Super Mario Bros., etc. Yeah, it's another no-brainer. It kind of reminds me of Puyo Puyo. It's just something that we missed out on here in the West, and I think Smash Bros. Would be the perfect portal to allow worldwide audiences to appreciate the magic of the Goemon franchise. And honestly, I think Sakurai probably agrees with me too. Not only is there the Mii costume, but in the description of the DLC, it makes direct reference to how well one of the Mii Sword Fighter's special moves represents Goemon's iconic Ryo toss, so yeah. Like I said, just check out these games. It's a really awesome franchise, especially if you're already into Nintendo stuff. I'm Backseat Sakurai, and I'll catch you later.